plug into what God is doing in this season. Hey, brother, how are you? You guys, let me know who's here and where you're tuning in from. Be sure to share. Hey, Ray, good to see you. Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. So, today we're talking about freedom, but it's a different kind of freedom. Today we're thinking about, the independence of the colonies from Great Britain. But today I want to talk about freedom to love, freedom to love. And I'm not just talking about, that you can love who you want and that all love matters. No, I'm talking about a freedom to truly, truly love the way God has intended for us to love. So we're going to deal with some difficult stuff. I'm going to make some revelations to you. And then we're going to dig deep. And I think it's important that we dig deep because we've been surface for way too long. And because we've been surface, our love has been surface. And, it results in surface relationships. It results in easy endings and things like that. And so we're going to go where Jesus went to talk about love. And let's talk about what real love really is, right? How it shows up and how it manifests. And we're going to dig into that. So you guys, we're going to go to hold on. We're going to go to the book of John. We're going to go to the book of John, and we're going to the 13th chapter. The book of John and the 13th chapter. And we're going to dig in. So let's dig in. Let's dig in. So listen. The book of John in the 13th chapter, and I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. Let me share my screen. Okay, let me see, y'all. I don't know if I'm going to be able to share on both of them. I don't think I am. So for those of you on my Veronica Duncan Walters page, I'm going to be reading it to you. For those of you on Veronica Walters or one of the groups, you're going to be able to see it on the screen. I apologize for the inconvenience. Hold on, you guys. Let me get this going. Okay. Share screen tab. All right. Here we go. Now, this is going to be, I'm going to read quite a bit of this chapter, so I want y'all to just bear with me and stay with me, okay? Let me roll up. This is a familiar passage of scripture. We, have heard it read it ourselves on a number of occasions. But I want to make sure that you guys are getting what this word is saying. And prayerfully, you'll get a deeper revelation into Jesus's mindset and what he was saying about love as we read. And it reads, starting with verse 1. Before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. Now, let me pause right there, okay? Because this is what I want to really dig into. It says that he had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. Hold on to that, because I want you to remember who his disciples were. These were not the perfect people. These were not the people that didn't have problems or flaws. They were flawed, and he loved them anyway, which is a point in and of itself. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't understand now what I'm doing, but someday you will." "No," Peter protested. "You will never ever wash my feet." Jesus replied, "Unless I wash you, you won't belong to me." Simon Peter exclaimed, "Then wash my hands and head as well, Lord, not just my feet." Okay, hold on one second. Let me scroll. Okay. Verse 9. Jesus replied, a person who has bathed all over does not need to wash except for the feet to be entirely clean. You got to remember that during this time, they wore sandals or they may have been barefoot. So their feet got dirty. So even though they had bathed, their feet would be dirty from travel, from just walking from the day to day. And you disciples are clean, but not all of you. For Jesus knew who would betray him. That is what he meant when he said, not all of you are clean. After washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I've given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. Here we go. Now we're at verse 18. Okay. I want y'all to stay with me. Stay with me. Verse 18. I am not saying these things to all of you. I know the ones I have chosen, but this fulfills the scripture that says, the one who eats my food has turned against me. I tell you this beforehand so that when it happens, you will believe that I am the Messiah. I tell you the truth. Now listen. I tell you the truth. Anyone who welcomes my messenger is welcoming me. And anyone who welcomes me is welcoming the Father who sent me. Now Jesus was deeply troubled and he exclaimed, I tell you the truth. Now one of you will betray me. We get into the betrayal. The disciples looked at each other, wondering whom he could mean. The disciple Jesus loved was sitting next to Jesus at the table. Well, we know that, they believe that that's John. John is writing this chapter. He is the disciple that Jesus loved. Okay. Simon Peter motioned to him to ask, who's he talking about? So that disciple leaned over to Jesus and asked, Lord, who is it? Hold on, let me scroll, y'all. It's getting juicy. Hold on. Okay, verse 26. Jesus responded, it is the one to whom I give the bread I dip in the bowl. And when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. When Judas had eaten the bread, Satan entered into him. Then Jesus told him, hurry and do what you're going to do. None of the others at the table knew what Jesus meant. Since Judas was their treasurer, some thought Jesus was telling him to go and pay for the food or to give some money to the poor. So Judas left at once, going out into the night. Now listen, I'm going to stop right there. And I want to talk about this, right? First of all, none of the disciples were perfect. None of them were perfect. All of them had their issues. All of them had their challenges. But Jesus loved them anyway and chose them anyway. He chose them even though he knew everything about them, right? It wasn't that it was a surprise. Sometimes when we embrace people, we bring people into our life, we don't know some stuff about them. And so it shows up and we're shocked. Jesus was not shocked by anything that was getting ready to transpire. He knew exactly who they were. He knew the end from the beginning. He knew Judas would betray him and Peter would deny him. He knew that the other disciples would disappear in the midst of his trial and when he was being persecuted. He already knew that. He chose them in spite of knowing that, and he loved them in spite of knowing that. In fact, I believe that Jesus provides us with the ultimate example for what that unconditional love looks like. He knew what was happening. He knew what was going on. He knew what was getting ready to take place. He knew what was getting ready to transpire. And he still yet washed the feet of the one who was going to betray him and loved him. I titled this Freedom to Love. Because Jesus didn't love from a place of expectation in terms of expecting them to do certain things or expecting them to be a certain way or expecting this or expecting that. No, he loved from a place of, I love you, period. Now listen, I'm going to share some stuff with you guys. And I want you to take some time today to do some personal reflection, because it's going to require personal reflection in order for you to truly tap into the freedom to love the way that Christ loved. It's going to take some personal introspection. You're going to have to look at you. You're going to have to hold up the mirror. You're going to have to examine yourself. As I'm talking about this, I do not want you to think about anybody else that this could apply to. I want you to specifically apply it to your life. It's way too easy for us to think about who could benefit from this, who this is for. But I want you to make this for you. And I want you to really dig deep. And I want you to really examine yourself, examine your heart, okay? So here they are, and they're sitting at the table. They're having the Passover, because that's what it was. It was the Passover. What we call the Lord's Supper was a portion of the Passover, right? So, and we miss that sometimes because we don't know our history. We don't truly study the life of Jesus the way we need to. Like, we get the bits and pieces and then we make it be what we want it to be. But we don't understand a lot of times that Jesus was actually a Jew engaged in Jewish traditions and customs. And so therefore we are connected to and related to and in relationship with Jews. Okay. So here it is. They're sitting there. They've had the Passover, and Jesus tells them, listen, I'm gonna wash your feet. I'm gonna wash your feet. I'm doing this as an example. If you've never participated in a foot washing ceremony, it is an amazing thing, right? It's incredibly humbling because nobody wants to touch people's feet, right? That's real talk. But to wash your brother or your sister's feet is the ultimate sign of humility, right? And then everything comes from, it's a matter of motive and where you're doing things from. So you've got to be aware of that, right? If you're doing it for show, it's not the same, okay? But he washed their feet. He got down on his knees. He had the basin of water. He ran the water over their feet. He touched their feet, and then he took the towel from his waist and he dried their feet off, right? It was a symbolic gesture showing that as a leader, as the master, as the teacher, that you still needed to serve. And true leadership is servant leadership. People want to lead. They want the accolades of leadership. They want the authority of leadership, but they're not necessarily committed to servant leadership. And it is in that place of servant leadership that Jesus placed himself on that day. I'm not going to say he found himself because he chose it. It was intentional. Right. And so as they're there and he's finished and he begins to explain to them what's just happened, what just transpired. And he's telling them this because he wants them to really understand what he did and why he did it and the importance of the washing. Of course, here we have Peter, and you know, Peter always takes things to the extreme, right? Peter's like, well, Lord, if you got to wash my feet, then if I got to do this to be clean, don't just wash my feet, wash my hands and my head too, right? And so Jesus explained to Peter, no, you're clean, right? You're clean. I just need those who've already been clean, those who are already clean, they only need their feet washed, right? That's it. He said, but not all of you are clean. He said, you disciples are clean, but not all of you. Not all of you. Because he knew there was one who was not clean, who had ill intentions, who would betray him, who would turn on him, who would sell him out. He knew that, and he knew who it was. He still washed his feet, dried them with the same towel, washed them with the same care that he washed all the other disciples' feet with. Dried it with the same love and care that he dried all the other disciples' feet with. And Peter, while he's sitting up here talking about wash my hands and my head, Jesus knew that he was going to deny him. So you sitting up here talking about wash my head and my hands too. I want you to wash all of me so that I can be, but you getting ready to betray me. And Jesus knew it. And then he predicted it. And Peter, of course, denies it. Peter says, no, not me. I never do that. Listen, I'm here for you, Jesus. I won't deny you. Same Peter denied him. Now they're sitting there at the table. Everybody's trying to figure out, well, who is he talking about that is going to betray him? Who is the one you know? And instead of them inspecting themselves, right, they trying to point the finger at somebody else around the table, which is what we often do. We point the finger at somebody else, right? Because it's easier to point the finger at someone else than to truly look at ourselves. Now, y'all may be saying, Dr. V, I know you were talking about freedom to love, but what does Jesus' sacrifice here? What does his washing of the feet, drying with the towel? What is his interaction, this last Passover that he celebrates with his disciples, with his friends, with those that he loves and who love him? What does that have to do with the freedom to love? See, I think that we get freedom really twisted. Freedom comes with responsibility. We think that freedom is doing whatever you want without any consequences, without any restraints, without any boundaries on it. But true freedom, yes, you have the ability to do whatever you want, but you choose to do things in a responsible way. You choose to love the way that Christ loved. Well, what is the way that Christ loved? Jesus loved Judas knowing that he was going to betray him. He loved Peter knowing that Peter was going to deny him. He didn't love them because of what they did or because of who they were. He loved them in spite of who they were and in spite of what they would do. I want you to sit on that for a minute. He didn't love them because of who they were and what they would do. He loved them in spite of who they were and what they would do. In spite of the fact that they were going to deny him, in spite of the fact that Judas would betray him, in spite of the fact that the other disciples would disappear into the woodwork, in spite of it, he loved them. And he loved them enough to set an example for them, an example that they would be able to carry on, an example of what true love is, an example of what leadership is. So let me talk to you guys for a moment. This past year, I have been on a journey of healing, right? And healing requires that you look at yourself, that you truly examine yourself, right? And it's easy in the midst of those times to point at other people, but not really look at yourself, right? And so I had to really engage in some introspection. You know, God has been revealing things to me and showing me things. And I'm like, okay, God, what is this? What does this mean? What are you telling me? So I realized that my love is conditional, that oftentimes it's transactional. That's a hard pill to swallow. That was a hard one to face. To look myself in the eye and say, whoa, wow. Ooh, that's deep. So when God talked to me about Jesus's love for Judas, like it really gave me a clarity on the way that we should love. Now, I want you guys to understand it's not that I don't love people. I absolutely do love people. I'm very loving. I'm very giving. But let me add the but. I realized that when I become afraid, when I become too close, when I'm afraid of being hurt, when I'm afraid of people leaving, when I'm afraid that it's not going to go or turn out the way that I want it to turn out, I began to pull back. I began to disconnect. I began to engage in what my brain would say are self-protection mechanisms. We all are wired to protect ourselves. We're wired to protect ourselves from any type of hurt, harm, and danger. And the truth of the matter is, loving feels dangerous. Loving feels risky. Loving feels scary. Because to truly love someone is to lay yourself on the line, right? To lay your heart on the line. And I don't know about you all, but I know for me, I got some issues I've had some challenges, that's what I'm going to say, with control. Like I want to control, but I don't want to control just to control. I want to control in order to prevent myself from being hurt. Well, the reality is you can try to control all day long and still get hurt. Jesus knew And I want you to think about, do you think Jesus wasn't disappointed? Or do you think that it didn't hurt him to know that these people that he had poured into, that he had loved on, that he had trusted, that he had walked with, that had walked with him, that had seen him perform miracles, that had seen him heal the sick, raise the dead, that feed the hungry? Do you think that it did not bother him, that he didn't feel a way about them betraying him, denying him, or disappearing on him? Do you really believe that? Do you think Jesus was without emotion? Because he wasn't. He was 100% human and 100% God, but he had emotions, right? And so, yeah, I'm sure that hurt, but it didn't stop him from loving them full out. Full out. He loved them full out. He didn't love them part of the way. He didn't hold some back on reserve. He loved them full out, knowing full well what was going to happen. How many of you can say, and maybe you can, I'm not saying that my issue is everyone's issue or my challenge is everyone's challenge. I'm not saying that. But how many of you can honestly say that when you love, that you fully love, full out, regardless of what the person does, regardless of their issues, regardless of where it goes, regardless of if it ends up the way you want it to end up, regardless of whether they do what it is that you want them to do, regardless of whether they provide you with what you need in your life, regardless of that, you just love full out. No expectations, with no limitations, just love. Allowing the love of God to flow freely through you without anything attached to it. I can't say that. I can't. Maybe you can, but I can't. Because I have some things like, if you might hurt me, like I'm pulling my love. Or what do I say? I'm going to love you from a distance. Okay? I haven't gotten there. And if we will be honest with ourselves, most of us haven't gotten there. So when we look at this situation with Judas, when we look at it, normally we don't look at it from the perspective necessarily of how much Jesus freely, openly loved one he knew would betray him. Because if we know somebody's going to betray us, we're going to get them out of our camp. We're going to move them out of the way. We're going to deal with them with a long handle spoon. But to just be able to love full out, regardless of the outcome, regardless of what the person does, regardless of anything, most of us haven't done it. We're too scared to love full out. We're scared of disappointment. We're scared of being hurt. And so when we see or feel or sense that something might be changing or something might not be right or something is off, we pull back. Because we don't want to be hurt. And I get it. No one wants to be hurt. But what if we change our perspective? And this is the thing that God has been dealing with me on. So this is why it pays to have people in your life who you can be honest with and they can be honest with you. What God is dealing with me on is really recognizing, why is it that I'm afraid to love full out? What is it that prevents me from loving full out? What experiences, what things that I've encountered prevent me from really putting my all into love? Now, let's just be honest. Most of us have had relationships where we felt like we really loved the person and we gave them our all and they hurt us. Or their actions hurt us, right? And so then we backed out of that relationship. We may have ended it, or we may have continued in it for a while, right? And then there were continuous breaches in the relationship. And those breaches led to us feeling like we have to protect our heart. But the truth of the matter is, one, it's not about us. And two, our heart really doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. And we, three, cannot prevent or stop ourselves from being hurt, per se, or stop people from doing what they're going to do. But what we can do is entrust our heart to God. You see, this is the thing about God and God's love. If you're loving full out without expectation and without conditions, whatever people do, they do. It doesn't say anything about you. It doesn't say anything about the relationship, and it doesn't say anything about the love. But we've been taught and conditioned that when people do certain things, that means they don't love us, right? Or they don't love us enough. Or we attach these expectations and these conditions to it, right? Which is why when someone cheats, we are like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that to me. Well, did they do it to you? Or is it a choice they made for themselves, right? Does it say something about you? Because we've been conditioned to believe that it does, that if someone cheats, if you're in a relationship with someone and they're talking to someone else, or they have relations with someone else, and it says something about you and it says something about your relationship. And that's not necessarily the case. Each person has to deal with the stuff that they have inside of them, right? They have to deal with their own desires, their own fears, their own insecurities. All of that stuff that's going on in them is in them. It's not in you. It's not about you. But you make it about you because it's easier to make it about you than to acknowledge that, this person has some stuff that they're working out, because we don't really love full out. Like, we love with conditions. We love with expectations. I'm going to love you with the expectation that you're going to love me back the same way that I love you. I'm going to do for you with the expectation that you are going to also do for me. Listen, it's so tit for tat, it's so transactional, and it's so deeply embedded in us that we don't even recognize it. I remember someone said to me, that seems a little transactional. And I was like, what? My love is not transactional, okay? I just love. Like, I gave this person everything and da-da-da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da-da-da and all that I had done. The truth of the matter was, it was very transactional. Whether I wanted to admit it or whether I wanted to see it or not was irrelevant. It did not change how my love was showing up. We cannot show forth the love of God transactionally. We can't. That's not the love of God. That's our interpretation of God's love. The love of God is the love like Hosea had for Gomer. Even though he knew she was a hoe, and everybody knew she was a hoe, even though none of the children that she had, that he named and he took care of, were biologically his, even though she kept leaving and going out in the streets hoeing, he still had to love her. Even when someone was getting ready to sell her, he had to go and pay for his wife and take her home. That is God's unconditional love. We call it stupid. I remember looking at women in my family and women in my life who, may have been in a relationship with someone that was cheating, looking at them like, you dumb. Ain't no way I'm getting ready to be with no man that I know is cheating on me. And I'm just like, okay, I love you. No. And so very early, I created in my mind, listen, if you can't add nothing to the equation, if you can't do nothing for me, if you don't contribute to my life in some shape, form, or fashion, you're not getting ready to be in my life. That's transaction. I'm not telling you that, well, Yes, I am telling you this. I'm telling you that true love loves without the constraints, the restraints, and the boundaries. It gives people the opportunity to grow, to develop, to become, in the same way that we need the opportunity to grow and to develop. Develop into who God has created to be, but do it from a place of love. You see, it's very challenging for me to face that my love has been transactional and not like come down on myself, because I tend to be very hard on myself, right? I'm harder on myself than anyone could ever be on me, right? To not get stuck in a place of condemnation, but condemnation is not of God. Conviction, that's God. When God pricks your heart and says, hey, I need you to look at this, you might need to make some changes. That's conviction. Condemnation puts you in that place where you become depressed and you become overwhelmed. And you say, I'm not good enough, and I knew I wasn't good enough. And it sows into all of those insecurities that we already struggle with. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you to truly examine yourself and then love yourself right where you are, with your imperfections and your flaws. I know people say, oh, we shouldn't talk about astrological signs and stuff. But I'm going to talk about it for a minute, okay? You can receive or not receive. I'm just talking about me. I'm a Leo on the cusp of Virgo, which means that I tend to be very strong, very independent. I tend to be very warrior-like. But that Virgo brings this perfection in, right? This desire to be perfect, this feeling that I have to be perfect, right? And if I'm not perfect, then I won't be loved, right? Add to that feeling like I wasn't enough for my parents, right? That something must have been wrong with me because my mom didn't keep me, or my dad always found something wrong with me. So we're combining, we're layering things. Add to that the times that I really liked someone and they didn't like me back, right? Add to that the times that I was in relationships and maybe they cheated, right? Add to that the times that I went for a goal and I didn't make it, right? So we begin to stack and layer all of this stuff on top of each other until we find ourselves weighted down with stuff that is not truly who we are. And we begin to examine ourselves through that lens, and we begin to condemn ourselves, and we begin to find things wrong with us, or we begin to put on a show. Well, what I want you to know is this: you need to be able to look at yourself naked and be unashamed and take in everything about you, the good, the bad, the indifferent, all of it, and still love you, because that's what God does. God saw everything about Judas, everything. He knew what Judas would do. He knew where Judas was going. He knew how the story was going to end, and he chose to love him anyway, right there in that space, right like he was. Not after he figured out that he was wrong, not any of that, just love. Love is revolutionary. Love is revolutionary. And when we begin to love ourselves like that, then we can love our neighbors as ourselves. See, right now, as we love our neighbors as ourselves means that we're transactional. Come on, y'all, let's be real. We're transactional with ourselves. We love ourselves when we do good. We applaud for ourselves when we get it right. But when we get it wrong, we mope and we moan and we groan and we complain and we talk about all the things that are wrong with us, instead of just loving us enough to love us through the journey. I look at my, in my reflection, I was talking to my daughter last night and I apologized to her. You see, I understand that religion did a number on me. Religion provided me with boundaries that I needed, but they were false. They weren't my boundaries. They were boundaries that were external to me, which means that I didn't do things because of this boundary, not because I didn't want to do them, but just because of this boundary. So why I didn't do it was not because I didn't want to do it. It was because I felt like I'm not supposed to do this because this boundary says, and so I'm not going to do it because of the boundary. But when the boundary is moved, then what happens, right? So I was talking to my daughter and I said, I'm sorry, baby. Please forgive me. Please forgive me for capping you. See, my daughter has a very vivid memory. It was her birthday. She was having a birthday party and there was a dance contest. And she and my niece were dancing against one another. And my niece was breaking it down and she dropped it like it was hot. And my daughter was getting ready to go. She was getting ready to take off. She was going to go for the gusto. And I looked at her like, if you're behind, do all of that. Oh, we finna have a problem. She stopped. And my niece won the dance contest and my daughter just cried because she knew that she could have won. But I stopped her. I wouldn't let her be great. And I apologize because truly the fact of the matter is I felt like people would look at her some type of way and I would look at her some type of way because of these false boundaries. I know we want our kids to live a certain life. We want them to show up a certain way. But the truth of the matter was I was concerned about how people would look at me. This is the pastor's daughter and she's doing all of that. What's going on in their house, right? Facts, truth. I began to put her to a standard and hold them to a standard that was not their standard, but I made it their standard because it was the standard that I had created, that religion had created for me. It wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in rules and regulations. And, you don't do this, good people don't do this. Church people don't do this. Holy people don't do this. And so what really triggered it for me is I was looking at my grandbaby, Brooklyn, and there was a video and all of these kids were surrounding her and they were cheering her on. They were like, go Brooklyn, go Brooklyn. And Brooke was jumping and she was jumping and she took a step and she fell over. She had her booty in the air and she's like looking between her legs. Like, I know she was bouncing. And I just laughed because she was a child being a child and enjoying life. Do you remember what that was like before religion, before people, before you put all of these boundaries and barriers and blocks on you, right? Told you all the things that you couldn't do and then instead of all the things that you could do, right? And you found yourself in a place where you just were free to live, free to be, free to play, free to love. You see, Brooklyn doesn't have any conditions on her love. None. She just loves. She doesn't love because you're going to pick her up. She doesn't love because you're going to give her her cup or bottle, or she doesn't love because you're going to do what she wants you to do. She just loves. That's what babies do. And then we train them to limit and condition their love. We do that. We do that to them. And then they grow up and they have all these issues and insecurities and all of this stuff surrounding love and relationships and people that we have imposed on them because we got hurt. I remember with my boys, I was real big on don't bring no white girl home. Do not bring Becky to my house. Talking about this is my girlfriend, Becky. Don't bring Becky. And when I really looked at why I was like that with them, it was because I had a bad experience in a interracial relationship. And it wasn't the bad experience with the person, it was his family. It was they looked at me as though I was not enough. And I never wanted anyone to feel like they could look at my kids like they weren't good enough for their child, for someone else's child, because of the color of their skin. Do not get it twisted. right? I was like, oh, no one will ever do that to my kids, right? I won't allow it. So therefore, I don't want you dating nobody white, because I don't want white people thinking they have the nerve, the gall, and the audacity to look down their nose at you because you're black. And I remember vividly having a conversation with the young man's mom after they had decided they didn't want me, a black girl, calling their house anymore. And they didn't tell me, but they felt like he should tell me, and he told me. And I was like, what? Oh, no, I'm going to your house. And I was trying to get up the hill to get to his mom to talk to her. And God wouldn't let me get up the hill until I could calm down some, right? And I remember having the conversation, and I remember how hurtful it was to have someone tell me, it's not you, it's just that you're black. Because she didn't understand that my blackness was an integral part of my identity and who I was. I couldn't peel it off. It wasn't an accessory that I could just add or subtract whenever I wanted to. It's me. And I need you all to understand that whoever you are, that whatever color, whatever religion, whoever you are, right? Whatever orientation, like whoever you are good enough. You deserve love, and God loves you in spite of anything you may do wrong or outside of his will, or anything that may not look like his love. He still loves you. So last night I spent a lot of time in reflection. I had some deep conversations yesterday. And at the end of it, my head just began to throb. I was like, this is too much. It's too much. It's too much. It's a lot. Not as too much, but it's a lot, right? And it is a lot because it's built up, right? It's built up over time. I want to let you know today, right now, that God absolutely loves you just like you are. I don't care what you've done, and I don't care what you're doing. God loves you just like you. He doesn't love you once you figure it out. He doesn't love you once you stop sinning. He doesn't love you once you get it all together. He doesn't love you once you, no. He loves you right now, just like you are. And he loves me right now, just like I am. While I'm on my way to becoming the greatest version of me, he loves me every step of the way. And he loves you every step of the way. Now, that doesn't mean don't continue your evolution. Doesn't mean that. Continue to evolve. It's a part of what we're called to do. It's a part of our life assignment, our life mission, because we cannot totally fulfill the purpose of God for our life if we don't continually evolve. We got to evolve to become that person that we were born, right? That life, circumstances, parents, peers, relationships begin to chip away at. God loves you unequivocally, without condition. And you deserve that love from a human being. But allow them to grow to love you like that. You see, in the same way, we have conditions on our love, and our love may be transactional. They probably have those same things too. So you grow together. And that's the beauty of relationship. That's the beauty of true relationship. Whether we're talking friendship, business relationship, or marriage. That's the beauty. It's in the context of relationship that we have some of our greatest growth. Because we've got to have a safe place. We can't just do it by ourselves. We can't. We were created to be connected to one another. Not dependent upon one another, but definitely connected. Interdependent, connected, intertwined with one another. Because it's in that place that we're able to truly evolve and share, and being able to share without fear of condemnation, or fear of rejection, or fear of them just leaving because they see who we really are. It's a beautiful thing. Jesus loved Judas just like he was, knowing what he would do. He loved Peter, knowing he would deny him. He loved the rest of the disciples, knowing that they would disappear during his most difficult times. But he loved them anyway. He loved them in spite of. And today I encourage you to love you. Love you. Why don't you try something? Why don't you just get naked? Just get naked. Take all your clothes off. Stand in front of the mirror and look at you and see you. See those flaws. And when you see them, resist the urge to think about, oh my God, if I didn't, but love you enough to embrace those things that may not be perfect right now. They're not perfect, but they're you. They're part of you at this moment. Now, if you don't like what you see, you can embark on the journey of changing it, but do it from a place of love, not a place of condemnation, because that's what God does. And that's how God moves. There's some things that we need to do, and we need to do them for us, not for anybody else. So I'm going to share this song with you guys, and I pray that you guys hear it. Allow yourself to meditate on it. In fact, right now, I want you to just take a deep breath in through your nose and then release it through your mouth. Take another deep breath in through your nose. Release it through your mouth. In through your nose. Hold it. Now release it through your mouth. Close your eyes and just listen. In spite of my issues, you still love me. Beyond my frailties, beyond my fear, you see past my transgressions. You see past all of my shame. Decided to love me in spite of me. You gave me beauty for ashes, joy for my mourning, strength when I'm weak. Everything has changed. I'm no longer the same. My only desire is you. All I want is you. All I need is you. Nothing else matters as long as I'm with you. All I want is you. All I need is you, yeah. Nothing else matters as long as I'm with you. All I want is you. In spite of my issues, you still love me. Beyond my frailty, beyond my sin, all the mistakes I made, all the hurt, all the guilt and shame, decided to love me. You Love me in spite of me.
You took everything that was wrong and gave me beauty. Yes, you did. I thank God for joy. You gave me strength in my weakest moments. And because of you, everything is changed. I can wave bye-bye to my past. Right now, my only desire. I spent my life chasing stuff, but now all I want is you. Yeah. All I need is you. Nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. As long as I'm with you. As long as I'm with you. I may ask you for a lot, but the truth is, all I want is you. I want you to marinate in that and know that all God wants is you, to love you, to love him, and to love others. Now that may sound a little strange, right? Because I said to love you before I said love him. See, this is the truth of the matter. If you can't love you, you can't love him. And I think we get that so twisted. We want to say we love God, but we can't love ourselves. And if we can't love ourselves, we definitely can't love God. And if we can't love God and ourselves, we can't love others, not the way they deserve to be loved. Let's take this love journey and know that God is here for us, to love us along the way. Angels surrounding us, to remind us of his love. Signs and wonders showing up to remind us of how strategically and deliberately he loves us. Now let's love ourselves so that we can truly love him and truly love others. You guys, listen. I love you to life and life more abundant. Whether you ever watch another video, follow, like, share, give, it's irrelevant. Just know that you're loved. Today, let's walk in the freedom to love. And start with you. Start with yourself. And then work your way out. Listen, I love you guys. Be blessed.